They took it inside them. And when they took that fruit inside them, the snake was in the fruit. It's like a worm in an apple. They swallowed the apple, but they also swallowed the worm that was in the apple. And then he became intertwined with them, and they lost the consciousness. It was an unconscious consciousness that they had, because they hadn't yet come to a full consciousness of who they were. But they were walking around in the light of God. They had no idea of anything except provision and light and beauty and joy. They had no idea of anything negative. They didn't know heat or cold. They didn't know sorrow. And they didn't know joy either, really, because they knew if you don't know sorrow, you don't know joy. So there had to come some kind of experience where mankind, to be the sons that we are, to be conscious sons who are conscious of who we are and why we are and what we're about, there has to be this educational process where we understand the difference between joy and sorrow. We understand the difference between life and death. So the only way we can actually know that is to, in some measure, experience it ourselves. It's like seeing a picture of the Grand Canyon and going there. No comparison. If you've been there, you know what I mean. If you haven't been there, you don't. I've been to both the Grand Canyon and Niagara Falls. And I've heard people say, well, Niagara Falls is a lot like the Grand Canyon. Niagara Falls doesn't hold a candle to the Grand Canyon, in my opinion. I guess other people would see differently, because it is such a vast thing, and it cannot be captured on camera. It can't be captured on TV. Can't be captured in a motion picture film. You must see it yourself. Well, this life of God is the same way. It's not something that we just know through a book, or through being taught in Sunday school, or through hearing sermons. It's something that we must live. It's something that we must experience. You must become one with truth to know truth. Truth must be intertwined with you, so that you start being who you really are. And that's the whole purpose of this life of God and this redemption that Jesus Christ has accomplished for us. Well, now, getting back to what I said, the whole human race was captured, and somebody had to come along and deliver the human race from that capture and reconnect us to the true source of life. The main result of the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the devil told them that if you eat this, you'll become wise as gods. You'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Well, now, what is a God? A God is a self-sufficient being. A God is somebody who can do it. A God is somebody who is independent, alone, he needs nothing from anyone. In fact, he kind of deserves the praise and adoration of everyone else. This kind of God does. And so what happened in the fall was every human being that came after that was a little independent godlet in their own thinking and in their own consciousness. Now, people didn't really necessarily think of themselves as gods, but that's really what happened, because a mentality arose of aloneness, a mentality arose of independence, in which we see ourselves as just a unitary self, not hooked up with any other self. You see, the union is from the beginning, and God breathed into Adam his own breath, and Adam became a living soul, it said. So Adam began to be alive and be a person when the breath, and the breath of God is the Spirit of God, entered into him. So that the Adam's life was, from the beginning, was a union life. He wasn't just created a solitary being on the earth, independent and alone, separate from God up here, and Adam and Eve alone down here, trying to run around in the garden and be like God, who was over there, up there, somewhere where they were not. That only occurred in the fall, because Adam and Eve suddenly became alone, and they suddenly became scared, and they suddenly realized their own nakedness, which is more than just the fact that they looked down and saw that they didn't have any clothes on. There's a lot more involved in that. And the first thing that they knew was separation. They hid. They were afraid. They were guilty. And in that guilt and fear is separation, because they thought they didn't, apparently they didn't really know that before they had been united with God, because it had been an unconscious thing. His life had been the inner life that they were. Well, in partaking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is that they could be that themselves, which is what Lucifer had done in the eternals. In the eternities, he had said, and you can see this in Isaiah chapter 14, he said, I will be like the Most High. I will ascend above the stars. It says in Ezekiel chapter 28 that he saw his own beauty and he worshipped his beauty. He thought, man, I am great. Look at this beauty that I have, these jewels, these encrustments. Well, all that came from God. It's kind of like if the moon were a sentient being. The moon had a consciousness of its own. And the moon decided one day that it didn't need the sun, because look at this light I've got that I'm shining on the earth all the time. This is glorious light that I have. And if it were possible to cut itself off from the sun and say, what would happen? Well, the moon has no light of its own. The moon is a dark mass. And what we see on the earth is the sun's light shining on the moon, and then we see the moon. And that's another example of who God is. God is light, and what he does when he shines on things is he manifests those things. I don't look up there in the sky and go, oh look, the sun's light united with the moon. I'll just say, oh look, the moon. And I even call it the moon's light. We call it moonlight in the nighttime. Well, that's because that union happens. And the union makes us forget that it is a union, and we call a lamp, we just turn on the light. Well, actually that's a union. That's electricity and the inert objects that the electricity flows through that creates the light. And but we just say turn on the light. And we look at the moon and we say, look at the moon. But we're really seeing the sun and the moon in a union. The light of the sun and the moon in a union. Well, that's our life. Our life was supposed to have been from the beginning a union of God and us, but it manifests us. You see, it's not just that we're manifesting God. Again, going back to what I originally said, God's plan isn't for us to all sit around the living room and tell him how great he is through all eternity. His plan was to shine on us and bring forth us. Parents want their kids to be successful. Parents want their kids to go out in the world and reproduce and build lives. Well, that's what God wants of us. He wants us to manifest him through being ourselves. That's what union is, where the sun shines on the moon and brings forth the moon. But Satan thought, oh, I'm the moon, I've got my own light, and I'll just be my own light. To heck with God, I don't need him. Well, of course we know that his light became darkness, and that since his choice was an eternal choice, because he's an eternal being living only in eternity, therefore it's irrevocable. Well, our choice, Adam and Eve's choice, was made in a temporal way, in a temporal setting, and so their choice can be reversed up to a point. So what happened in the whole human race when they fell was this, what's called the old man, what the New Testament calls the old man, was created, so that there's this old man who thinks he's somebody, and everybody starts living after the force of might, after getting for themselves, after what we call self for self. I'm for me and to heck with you. God is I'm for you and to hell with me. Think about that. That's what Jesus did. But this whole thing, and then also this consciousness arose in the human race that is also the result of that, which is what we call independent self, or self which thinks or believes or acts as if it is independent of God. It is not. It never is. Paul said to the Athenians, who were idol worshippers and philosophers and everything but Christ,